This series is going to empower you to put your finger on what's wrong with our country, what you can do to restore our nation, and it may serve to renew your hope. This is the second video in the series, so if you haven't seen the first one, be sure to check it out when we're done here. In the first video, I introduced you to that feeling of being an orphan in our own country. To know our own country, I had to explain it as the founding fathers first established it. Now, we get to the antagonist of the story, the bad guys, the enemy. In answering the question of if liberals are unforgivably stupid or consciously evil, first, we're going to explain what leftists value, then we'll cover how that plays out in their politics and policies. To know what Democrats believe, I dove into this giant piece of literature. The Democratic Party platform. If you want to understand what Democrats say they're after, what their vision for America is, this document will show you. Due to the immense research involved in episode 1 with regards to the Declaration, the Constitution, the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, I was familiar with how conservatives grounded their values, their policies, and their politics. That seemed like home to me as American as apple pie. Figuring out how leftists, liberals, progressives, or Democrats supported their platform with the founding documents was a more difficult task. The reason? They don't use them at all. At least, not as they were originally written, intended, or upheld. You don't arrive at the Dem platform from the founding documents, which I find disturbing. These are the leftist principles. Freedom, but in a different way. To begin understanding how leftists view freedom, you need to understand the difference between negative and positive rights. Negative rights are rights against harms. Positive rights are rights to certain benefits. One is protection, the other is something owed. The founders saw freedom as the ability to act in virtuous ways and the freedoms from undesirable threats against life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Conservatives ground human rights in our nature. Humans possess rights to be free from being ruled by another, just from the fact of being human. The government does not award these rights, for they are innate and a part of human dignity. Because we are the type of creatures that we are, freedom is essential to our nature. Governments are to acknowledge these innate freedoms and protect them. Leftists challenged this basic tenet of freedom. Leftists believe no one has equal rights, so the government should make them equal through social reform, through law and civil rights protections. What this leads to is positive rights of benefits owed to the less fortunate, however the government defines them. As nice as this sounds, this is a huge problem because rights are stripped from being grounded in our nature to being grounded in the government. What started as a mandate to care for the disadvantaged or less fortunate ended in tyranny. If the government grounds our rights, instead of acknowledging we already have them, those freedoms and rights can be redefined, they can be changed, they can be awarded or taken away, they can be abused. This is the type of government the founders warned us about. To understand how we got here, we need to know the tipping points of history, the contributors in our present condition. President Woodrow Wilson served as president from 1913 to 1921. A graduate of Johns Hopkins University, you'll see why that's important in just a little bit, was one of the first to chip away at the founders' understanding of freedom.
I was there 3,000 years ago.
With his new freedom, he sought to employ the power of government on behalf of social justice for all. Sounds great on the surface, until you learn that he defines social justice as equity of outcomes for all, equal benefits owed to all U.S. citizens, and not equal opportunity for all.
And this is why you were saying you are opposed to equality of outcome.
I can't imagine anything we could possibly strive for in our society that would make it into hell faster than equality of outcome.
When Isildur took the ring, I was there the day the strength of men failed.
This is the first step toward communism and a demotivated society. Richard T. Ely, 1854 to 1943, was an economist who taught at Johns Hopkins University and consequently a teacher of Woodrow Wilson.
I led Isildur into the heart of Mount Doom. Where the ring was forged, the one place it could be destroyed.
Johns Hopkins University was founded on the purpose of bringing German education to the United States. Ely focused on social reform of ethical ideals. John Dewey was largely influenced by Ely, expanding Ely's positions to the education system. It wasn't enough to allow for the protections of liberty. For true freedom, Dewey held, is defined as positive grants of resources, education, and character development. President FDR, who served as president from 1933 to 45, built upon Wilson's new freedom. He believed, in order to be free, one must be liberated from the constraints of economic necessity. This is a positive rights orientation. It is incumbent upon the government to provide all the needs one could have for them to truly be free, even freedom from the necessity of work.
Cast it into the fire!
The founders didn't want freedom from necessities, for they understood it was essential to our nature and the way the world worked. They wanted the freedoms for the individual to deal with necessity as they saw fit, not as the government deemed it. John Dewey, 1859 to 1952, was another student of Johns Hopkins University. Are you seeing a theme here? Dewey was heavily influential in politics, philosophy, psychology, the American education system, as well as the Humanist Manifesto. He was one of the most effective at helping the culture to redefine freedoms away from the framers' teachings. You'll see why that's important in our education system series. He put one of the earliest attacks on the founders' understanding of freedom. Freedom is not something that individuals have as a ready-made possession. It is a product of human making.
Destroy it! No. Isildur! Should have ended that day, but evil was allowed to endure.
John Dewey applied Ely's progressive understanding of freedom to the education system. His solution for accomplishing this most necessary endeavor was government expansion, taxes upon the public, and a government-defined system of rights, rewards, punishments, and consequences. Through the influence of President Woodrow Wilson, Professor Richard T. Ely, President FDR, and educator John Dewey, the founders' understanding of freedom was rejected and replaced with promised positive rights, resulting in more power for the government to execute abuses against its populace through the front name of social justice. The founders knew that some would excel based upon work and talent, and others would not. But since we own our own bodies and minds, government should protect these different and unequal talents. Madison held, the attempt to make everyone equal would not only destroy liberty, but deprive people of the possibility of failure, a best incentive to master their self-destructive impulses and cultivate their talents. A right to life means I have a right not to be killed in a negative sense. It doesn't mean that all my needs of food, shelter, comfort, even luxury will be afforded me as benefits in the positive sense. Leftists and conservative conclusions are formed by their worldview. As you'll see in episode 4, the founders grounded the Declaration and Constitution in the nature of God. Dewey and the leftists grounded it in social conditions and ultimately the state. Progress. Where we learned freedom was the first and most important value for conservatives, leftists value progress. They hold that societal improvements evolving toward a better future will solve the great problems of humanity's past. This is where the term progressive comes from. They are believed to be progressing towards a better, more advanced utopian future. Equality of outcomes. Theodore Roosevelt, in his attempt for a second term in 1912, introduced equality of redistribution and welfare. This is an old idea, as old as Karl Marx. Leftists are founded in the principle that since all people are created equal, all people should be awarded the same result, regardless of work ethic, expertise, intelligence, handicap, or advantage. This, of course, goes hand in hand with socialism, big government, and the welfare state. It obliterates charity and enforces taxes be taken from those who have and given unfairly to those who do not. Consolidation of powers with no interference. Leftists believe there shouldn't be checks and balances in government, no separation of power, or three branches should exist because they slow progress. Woodrow Wilson argued, if you had a business, you wouldn't separate powers to stop progress and profit. Leftists hold that politics should gauge and influence public opinion toward the goals and visions of the president when it's their president. The president shouldn't be tasked with executing and enforcing the laws created by Congress, as the Constitution defines his role. Instead, he should act as the chief legislature through persuading public opinion, executive orders, and more recently, emergency powers. Big government and her experts will save us. What socialism, fascism, and other ideologies of the left have in common is an assumption that some very wise people, like themselves, need to take decisions out of the hands of lesser people, like the rest of us, and impose those decisions by government fiat. Paging Dr. Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci. This, of course, destroys the hope of a government by consent of the people, by the people, and for the people. The state awards dignity and rights. Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They signed a combined total of 6,605 executive orders, thousands more than any other three combined presidents, liberals or conservative, in our long history. Executive orders are rules issued by the president to an executive branch of the government and having the force of law. Through the power of executive order, these three men have changed the shape of our nation more than any other three presidents, good or evil. From their influence, progressivism, leftist ideology, and the administrative state rose, which stripped the rights from being grounded in human nature, as acknowledged in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, surrendering rights to the state. Since that power now originated in the state trumps the rights of the individual. Kind of strange to think of a government that began by consent of the governed, has morphed into a government that opposes the rights of the people. How does a government who supposedly gets its power from the people end up against its own? Woodrow Wilson saw socialism and democracy as one and the same. The community determines the destiny of the individual. The only limit on government leftists would allow was that held by the majority, the experts, or the administrative state, and not on the basis of rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Down with the system, man, except the government system. Conservatives hold that man has a fallen nature and is prone to evil and corruption. Leftists believe we have moved past these problems and man is inherently good. Leftists hold our problems are not individual but systemic. Therefore, there's no personal responsibility. The system is the problem, and since you are a victim of the system, you need not change. We must change the system. The only way to do that is to give the state more power to take on something as big as the system. Interesting to think that they may have created the system. Politics and policy. In our modern day, here's how those values play out in politics and policy. This list is in a particular order, and for good reason. Where conservatives tend to hold all values as equal, leftists hold distributive justice as a higher moral value than other virtues. Here's what I mean. Number 1, healthcare affordability for all. Number 2, entitlements, Social Security and Medicaid. Those are benefits, positive rights. Number 3, superiority of non-Western people and Western minorities and women's rights. They reject American exceptionalism, and they oppose white men specifically. Number 4, abortion is a right. Number 5, protecting the environment over the needs of human life, liberty, and property. Number 6, sexual liberation, a preference for sexual activity outside of natural marriage that does not lead to children. Number 7, LGBTQ plus rights. Number 8, gun violence and opposition to the Second Amendment. Number 9, the key to foreign policy is negotiation and less military power. Number 10, distributive justice, concerned with equality of outcomes and not opportunity. To achieve the above goals toward a fair, just, and caring society, the state needs more authority to pay for the administration through raising tax rates and taxing the rich at higher percentages. Leftists also must employ a socialist economic state who owns or controls most businesses so they can enforce regulation and social governance to achieve social justice. It is promised that once they are given enough power, a utopian equality can be achieved. That hope is what procures the votes of the middle and lower classes who benefit off the welfare state. So are leftists unforgivably stupid or consciously evil? Both and neither. Some have been gaslit. Some are ignorant. Some have imbibed the drink of celebrities and popular culture whom the left own. Others have been sold a bill of goods and deceived to call good evil and evil good. Most have been indoctrinated and brainwashed by the public school system. Check out our next series called How We Got Here, the Education System. Many have trusted their government. Then there are those who know the evil it is they proffer. Some out of justification, others autonomy to sin. But the worst and most pernicious are they who have designed, executed, and planned for this grand deception to unfold.
But they're really criticizing science, because I represent science. I am the Senate.
But you, truly, are free. You see the truth of how we got here, the tipping points that made here possible. And truth has a way of asserting itself. Consider sharing this How We Got Here politically series with someone who needs to know. Keep dispensing those red pills. We know the homeland, the fact that we've been orphaned from it, and we know our enemy. Next, I'm going to show you how our country was stolen from us. To stay in Wonderland, click on the next video to see why the Constitution is the key, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.